I started hearing about AIDS, or as it was called in the press at that point, gay-related immunodeficiency syndrome, or GRID. It was first that was just a gay disease, and there were all kinds of rumors around that. But I read that the surest protection was to wear a condom during sex, so that's what I started doing. It became much more visible in the public eye in 1985 when Rock Hudson died, and at that point I was dating my boyfriend, who later dumped me. But at the same time I was living in Dorchester with a roommate, and he was someone who was also a seminary student. It's funny how we met. I had been going to the Bads in New York before I moved up to Boston, and mentioned to someone I went home with that I was be going to Harvard Divinity School in the fall, and he said that he had a friend who would be going to Episcopal Divinity School in the fall, and we should get in touch. And this friend of his got in touch with me, and we talked on the phone. We never actually met until we both showed up for rehearsals for the Boston Gay Men's Chorus, which was forming in the spring of '82, I believe. We became roommates shortly after that. I had to move from where I was living, and he had someone lined up as a prospective roommate who backed out. So there we were, living together in Dorchester. Now, when I was not dating anyone, and when we were both horny enough or drunk enough, we had fooled around, and I couldn't remember whether or not we had worn condoms. I eventually moved out after I had broken up with my boyfriend, and I moved to a place on my own. But I ran into my former roommate in Provincetown, where he was working at a shop in one of the hotels there. And he happened to mention that he was HIV positive, having possibly had unsafe sex with my roommate. And I know certainly before I moved to Boston, I was going to the baths and not using any protection, so I might have already been infected. Did I infect him? I didn't know. When I got back from Provincetown, I went and had myself tested, and it was a very nerve-wracking 2 weeks. When I went to find the results, I brought a friend with me and thankfully found out that I was negative. Back in those days, it was finding out that you were HIV positive was possibly a death sentence. I had acquaintances in the chorus. There were several people who passed away. There were people at my job where I was working who had passed away from AIDS-related diseases. So it was not as a hopeful prognosis as it is nowadays when it's not a death sentence. It's funny though, my former roommate, ran into him at one of my both of our favorite bars in Boston. And when I ran into him there, he told me he had moved to New York, and I was planning to move back to New York, a few months later. And so we said, well, we'll keep in touch. One afternoon, after I attended my service at MCC in New York, I was going to meet some friends near Madison Square to play games. I got there early, so I was sitting in the park there in Madison Square, and I saw someone conducting a service for the homeless, and it was my former roommate. So we caught up there, and he was doing fine. And my roommate now is still, still alive and living and healthy. So it's not the death sentence that it was before, but it doesn't mean, just because you can live with AIDS nowadays, doesn't mean that you should become casual about protecting oneself. And you should always wear protection and stay healthy.